that already.
All right, man. Episode 29, I think we're on. This Life in Tech. Hey, everybody, I'm Jason.
Hey, and I'm Dan.
Apparently, Brandon doesn't want to come on. He didn't feel adult enough today to talk about adult things because today, guys, we're talking about eVoting. I don't want to talk about Hillary or Trump too much. I mean, I'm sure it'll inevitably come up at some point, maybe. But what we were talking about, which I think was brilliant, is well, shit, man. You introduced it because it was your thought.
Yeah. So, I mean, we're talking about eVoting. I mean, I don't understand why we have this archaic way where everyone's got to stand in file, stand in a line, and say, "Hey, yeah, I'm going to vote." Here in the United States, when you're basically born, you have a certain amount of time. You get a social security number, which I already think is antiquated as it is, because there's really no way for us as a citizen to be able to invoke or revoke trust with a number that's essentially arbitrarily given to us by the government. Why not start bringing up this notion of a digital certificate being that identity? Because when we feel it's been compromised in any way, I mean, constantly right now, banks are being compromised all the time. Our identity theft is going to continue to be on the rise. The moment we feel that our identity in any way, shape, or form has been compromised, why not put the power back into the citizenry in order to be able to revoke it? And that way, all entities automatically go, all right, great, you are going to have to recreate your certificate for the trust aspect. And with voting, look at all the voter fraud. Every election, really, since we go back in time, they're always talking about voter fraud.
I mean, at least it's since we were in undergrad, for sure.
Yeah. But I mean, they had voter fraud, basically from the time people vote. There was no way to really track it. And this kind of, I get it that people are going to say at this point in time that doing something like this with technology will be some way, shape, or form bring minorities or those that are in poverty, that they wouldn't be able to do this. Well, I mean, I think at this point, a computer internet really should be something run by our, and I wouldn't say run by the government, but it's a utility. It's a way of life. It's a basic aspect of welfare, just like garbage, just like electricity, just like running water. We can't progress as a society if we were to remove access to technology. It doesn't have to be great, but I mean, shit, how much does it cost to give them at least, T1 speeds, 1.5 meg? I mean, it's enough to do eVoting.
Well, a predominant amount of people in this country still use public libraries for their internet access. I mean, I can tell you for a fact. So I'll give you an example of how this could scale quite easily. Undergrad started last week. Well, at least my classes did it at Cal Poly. And I mean, you've been there with me. That's a big fucking library, man.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And there's lots of students in there that are using those computers for access to just general information. I mean, they're not necessarily doing homework. Come on, man. That'd be naive to think. But they're using the computers for basic access to, basic digital life stuff, email, scheduling, class scheduling, so forth and so on. I tend to find myself leaning more and more towards libertarian anarchy. And and I think in that case, with the dissolution of a federal government, if we were to retain anything on the libertarian side of a federal government, it should be to put effort into things like decoupling this antiquated idea of federal identity, which is a string of numbers, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, they're a lot like credit card numbers insofar as the first tuple of digits identify the region you were born in.
And the year.
And the year. And, there's only a piece of it that's unique to you as a human being. And it's not the whole thing, just like a credit card, right? Just not all the digits are the actual number. It's the issuer, so forth and so on. I mean, come on, man. Like you were saying, it's the 21st century. We have this beautiful technology now. Let's say certificates wouldn't scale for some reason, which would be ludicrous because obviously it does because the internet uses it itself, right?
It's random number generation.
Yeah. What about blockchains? I mean, it's a phenomenal use of simple tech, which really is simple technology, not in its creation, but in its implementation. That would empower so much stuff, man. But can you imagine? Let's say that we woke up tomorrow, and we're gonna get rid of Social Security numbers. Can you imagine the shit that would break? I mean, man, I just filled out a form. This is ludicrous to me. I just filled out a form to decline coverage. Now, wait, I'm not applying for health coverage. I'm saying I don't want it. And you need a form from me saying that I don't want it, because clearly that absolves them of some liability because somebody sued them at some point for some fuckery with open enrollment, which is a rigged system to begin with. But on that form, I have to write my social security number. I have to write it. So not only do I have a social security number that now is on a piece of paper floating around somewhere, but I have to write it. I can't even type it in. They won't accept it.
Not only do you have to write it and you scan it or fax it or wherever, someone's going to put that into some record, which now, guess what? There's nothing out there that's going to read that really because there's no OCR for it, right? Because you're printing it, scanning it, whatever. Now, how many digital data locations is that one piece of paper in?
Right. Well, look, man, I mean, it's at least in 4 or 5 right off the bat. I have it. The school has it in the HR department. The broker that sits in between the school and the actual provider has it. And then the provider has it. I mean, you would think once, but having worked in health insurance for a while in the technology side, dude, it's at least in 4 or 5 different places there.
And because you use Gmail, Google has it and NSA has it.
And whoever else, right? and yet, they still mandate that it has to be a paper record with blue ink.
Wet signature. Signature.
Yeah. I don't know what to say, man. It's such a severely flawed system that how do you ever undo it? That's the thing, is it's such a basic flaw, right? To get rid of it, because so much shit is built on top of it, how would you even start that?
I don't know, it served a purpose at the time.
Sure.
And even on the Social Security card itself, it says this is not to be used for identification purposes.
Right.
So why do we continue to use it this way? It served a purpose back in its time. And this is what I'm finding with establishments that have been around for however, longer than a cup of coffee. They go, well, that's just the way we've always done it.
Right.
I hate hearing that, because I'll ask, well, why? And I'm reminded of the story when I actually got this when I was in my undergrad. Dr. Nazer, who was my undergrad professor, tells me this story, which is always kind of funny because he's from Iran and they don't eat pork, or he doesn't eat pork. So
yeah,
I'm sure he heard this story from somewhere. So anyway, he goes, this little girl asks her mom, because they're at Christmas time, why do we cut off both ends of the ham before cooking it? And she replies, I don't know. Go ask. It's the way your grandmother did it. Go ask your grandmother. So little girl goes ask her grandmother, hey, grandma, why do we cut off both ends of the ham before we put it in the oven? And she's like, oh, I don't know. That's the way my mom taught me. Why don't you go ask your great grandmother? So she goes and asks great grandma, hey, great grandma, why do we cut off both ends of the ham before we're cooking? And she goes, well, I don't know why we're doing that today, but back when I was first married and cooking ham, I only had a pan that was this big and the ham was bigger. So I had to cut off both ends so the ham would fit into the pan.
Right.
Now all of a sudden they got this big, huge pan, but they keep cutting off both ends when they no longer needed to do it because they don't understand the original reason. We have to, if we're going to evolve, we can't just continue to accept the status quo in anything. It should always be challenged. And when you take a look at, even when we bring this back to technology and security and industry, almost every compliance framework says on an annual basis, review the policies and procedures. Well, review doesn't mean just go, oh yeah, this is fine. It means to determine whether or not they should still apply and whether or not any modifications should be made based on changes that have happened in the last year. Well, Social Security number has been around since, was it 1920s?
Easily, yeah. Yeah.
Something like that. Someone can always fact check. Well, so almost 100 years. Do we think maybe it might have served its purpose and it's time to die along with every other dinosaur out there?
Well, in the compliance analog is interesting to me because I've found over time, working a predominant amount of my adult life in some form of auditing or compliance, specifically around cyber, whether it was SOX, PCI, whatever, right? It's just so pervasive. Sorry, man, my lips are dry.
I won't ask why. It's none of my business. I support you. I support you in anything that you choose to do.
That's why you're my best friend, man. Thank you. Why you eat your Scooby snacks, you fuck. Anyway.
Yeah, well, this segment hopefully would have been brought by if we actually had sponsors, Nate Cook cookies. But, they don't sponsor us, but I still like them. Peanut butter cookies, Wow. Maybe they should sponsor us for a segment. Hey, $5-10 is fine.
Sure. They're great little snacks, when you're you got the munchies.
Yeah, I guess. I don't know.
What the fuck was I saying? Oh, compliance. So this is what's interesting to me is compliance, like jury duty, becomes this burden that nobody wants to do, but everybody will participate in, right? Because the incentive, this is the fucked up thing about compliance and what's interesting about your angle on it. The incentive is to not have change. It's the opposite of what it should be because of the amount of extra work that has to go into whatever that change is, whether it's change management, all the documentation, explaining to the auditors why something changed. The incentive system is rigged to be the opposite of what the spirit of the control should be. What if, just like voting and just like government and just like compliance, you didn't fill out all that extra paperwork, and I mean that kind of figuratively. You didn't do that when there was a change. You did it when there wasn't a change. That way the incentive was to change.
Mm-hmm.
Now, sure, some people are just going to create silly little changes to check that box. I get it. But don't you think that would be the exception? Because to me, that's a more powerful status quo to support evolution. Right now, the status quo gets locked into homeostasis. Let's keep the way the system is and not change it. And if there's anything that wants to change it, we're going to attack it vigorously, which is dangerous, right? And that's why shit stagnates. But to me, if the incentive was on the opposite end, which is really the spirit of a control like that, where on that annual review when you sit down, if there wasn't any changes, there was mountains of extra fucking work to do to explain why you weren't adapting.
Mm-hmm. And that kind of brings, we bring it back down to the eVoting, getting it back to our topic. People will start throwing out there, oh my gosh, well, it can be hacked. It can be compromised. Well, so can everything.
Yeah.
Okay. If you fear that a vulnerability is going to, there's ways to lock down a device to make it secure. And if you're utilizing digital certificates in order to actually, something along those lines and say, hey, I'm going to utilize this type of trust in order to cast my vote, then why not? Until you do it, you're not going to understand the problems that you're going to have in order to fix them. Every system is flawed.
Well, let me give you a scenario, man. Check this out, because I think that argument's absolute horse shit, that we shouldn't do it because it's insecure.
I agree.
That's complete fuckery. And quite frankly, the people that say that are dumbasses. Here's why, man. Here's why. In my opinion, if I were able to register, vote, and audit my own vote at any time in the future based on a digital ID, whether it's blockchain, whether it's a certificate, a combination of the two, whatever, right? Okay. If it's transparent where I can audit my vote and I can audit anybody else's votes, and we can all do that, right? We all have equal opportunity to do that. How are you going to compromise the system in such a way to rig the vote?
Yeah.
Because,
now, the other...
real quick, just to finish,
go ahead.
If in auditing it, I detect that my vote was changed to something that my record shows I didn't vote for, I could just change it back, right? We already have in our system already. We have the concept of a recount. That already exists, at least at a local level, and I've seen it here in California, right? What were you going to say?
So the part I was going to get into with this is that the other argument they have with this is that voting is supposed to have some level of anonymity to it. And that utilizing these certificates, they say, doing the e-voting means that I now know exactly who you voted for. I'm going, and I also reject that argument because we have ways of, preventing that from occurring also. And there's also those same people that could be auditing it. Just if we take a look at, with ephemeral certificates. We could anonymize it if we so wanted, and still have a record on our end to be able to say, yes, I made this vote, and I can still go back and look because I know what occurred. There's so many ways to bring anonymity, even still with electronic voting, if you wanted to. I mean, you could. There's so many different ways in which this could be done. And the people just, again, they're scared of change.
Yep.
They're scared because they don't understand it. I was having to have this conversation with some people, locally here, the other day. They don't understand this world of security. It scares them. I've had to explain that some of the best security experts in the world, that some people would view them as being evil, like Weston from DEF CON. He just got hired by NCR. Mm-hmm. NCR is one of the largest manufacturers for ATMs. Mm-hmm. Many people would say, hey, he's a hacker. Well, NCR was like, you know what? I should probably hire someone like this because he keeps coming up with vulnerabilities in our ATMs and we want to fix them. So we have to stop as a society being fearful just because someone looks different, just because someone acts different, just because they understand and see things that others don't understand. They should be thankful that these people exist and are willing to do things that make a change.
Well, and I think that's part of that status quo. It's all part of the same system that reinforces itself. And look, I mean, I understand it from a human perspective. The prospect of something changing carries a probability that I'll lose what I have. And that's not a comfortable feeling. Now, I will say this though, to go back to one thing. I don't think the voting should be anonymous. I don't think so. I think there should be a full accounting of who voted for what when. And I think we should be fine with it. And whatever we need to change in ourselves to facilitate that, that's what I'm for, personally.
I don't necessarily know that I agree or disagree. I understand both sides of the argument. Because back in the day, people would use who you voted for as a means of political ridicule and to condemn. Mm-hmm. There's no reason why we can't, as a society, condemn those that would look up that information.
And that's exactly what I was going to say. Is rather than put the energy into, because here's the thing, right? I mean, we've seen this in our field. The more labor that goes into devising ways to come up with devices or software to protect things, that just really, in essence, increases the attack surface. So rather than worrying about anonymity and taking the time and the labor to put that into the system, which in and of itself is inevitably going to be flawed, why not just put the energy into an incentive system where looking that information up to gain an information asymmetry is de-incentivized and be heavily punished?
Well, look at census data. I was reading something the other day that says that the Census Bureau does not share that data with any other government agency. Mm-hmm. And it's not even FOIA, it's not even covered under FOIA. Right. But the Census Bureau winds up releasing that data, I think, after 30 years. Then they always release 30-year-old data. Mm-hmm. Well, why not do something like this in the same place? If the Census Bureau can do so, I'm sure we could wind up having an organization that could fall in the same lines to where no one can look at that stuff. That's just, pure and simple. But then again, no one was supposed to be able to look up any of our, classified records through OPM, but, they didn't really deem that to be, worth protecting. Thank you, U.S. federal government.
You're still butthurt about that, huh? I don't blame you. I don't blame you. I think it's just funny.
Yeah, I'm compromised for life. Thank you. so are my kids. It's great.
Yeah.
Which is again why, if I had some type of trust to where I could revoke it, I could say it doesn't matter. I could revoke it at any time, and that data is no longer valid.
Well, and what's interesting about it, man, is if you had some type of let's just loosely call it some kind of public. Some kind of PKI, whether it's a certificate, a blockchain, whatever else we could invent, which I think we could actually come up with something much better. The nice thing about it, man, is it's loosely coupled and you retain agency over your own quote unquote object. Right now, the big problem with something that's hard coded, tightly coupled like a social security number is I actually don't have agency over it. The entity that issues it to me has agency over it. And I don't know if you've ever had to go get a new card. Forget about changing numbers, which is impossible. But getting a new card, a replacement, is a fucking nightmare.
Actually, it's not anymore. I just had to do it.
Oh,
They've
really?
gotten better. Yeah, they've gotten a little bit better. So I just recently had to do this, and what they do is they marry that up with, if I remember correctly, with your tax records, and they will mail it to the last mailing address that you had with the IRS. And then they go through and ask you different credit questions, such as, hey, in the last X amount of years, which one of these things did you have? But then they mail it to where you had your address on your last tax records. So I got it. I got it in 10 days. I got it in less than 10 days.
Oh, that's that's way better than I take it
back.
Yeah. Speaking of which, have you ever thought about that database that has all that information in it? Because there's certain things I've had to do in the past where the questions are. I mean, that's a pretty deep table. That's table.
I mean, think about how long they're going back to get that information.
Right.
What happens if you move every 3 months? Imagine that. Like, oh, I don't remember all my addresses. I remember when I first filled out my clearance form, they were like, oh, you had to list all your jobs within the last period of time and all the places you lived.
Yeah.
And they had this basically category that if you weren't entirely sure, you could put a code next to it just to say, hey, I think it was this. So I put that on everything because I'm like, I might have been these times. I don't know. I don't remember because I moved a lot based on.
Right.
There were some times where I had like 3 jobs in 1 year, and I went and moved wherever was closest to those jobs. I just would break the lease and then go sign a new one.
Yeah, well, and it's actually categorically misrepresentative of human memory, and how you can actually by yourself, right, plant false memories. Dude, I lived in Connecticut for a long time. I think I remember the street I lived on. I'm not sure I remember the number. And whatever memories I have about being there at this point, because it was, some time ago, dude, I don't know if they're real or not. I don't trust them. I mean, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, man. I haven't seen that kind of situation come up in quite some time, but a number of years ago, I was doing something. I don't know what it was. And it had to do with background. And some of those questions came up. I'm like, dude, I think I know the answer, but how the fuck do you know to ask this question? I mean, that's what popped into my mind.
Because you've been being spied on your entire life.
Have you ever thought about asking for a copy of your FBI file?
I have thought about it, but I'm kind of like, I already know what's in there. I feel like I already know what's in there. I mean, I probably don't, but it's probably got all of my this is like the FBI's dream with all the social media stuff that's out there. Because like, oh, they may even be funding new social media products out there and say, hey, we're not going to secure it right away so we can get all the data, and then we'll wait for the public to say, hey, this isn't secured. Then go ahead and secure it, and then we'll start the next, I don't know, let's say, Tinder or whatever, in order so they can continue getting records from everyone. Right. Think about for how long WhatsApp wasn't encrypted and secured in any way, shape, or form, and now it's using Moxie stuff, right, in order to encrypt it. Yeah. So what's the next thing? Maybe it's all a government conspiracy to be able to continue tracking all of us.
So here's your next question. Based on FBI files.
And I'm only half joking about that.
Oh yeah, no, I know, man. That's why I'm keeping quiet. But here's my next question: would you be more surprised if the file came back and let's say it fit like in a couple boxes, like it's fat, or would you be more surprised if there was like one sheet of paper and it had your name on it and that's it?
One sheet of paper.
I've thought about that, and I think that's what would surprise me more.
Yeah, if it only came back with a sheet of paper and basically said, "Here's full name, social security number, addresses you've lived," that was it. That would be like, what? That's it?
Yeah.
But then again, it wouldn't really surprise me because I think that most of the people over at the FBI are, idiots anyway.
Oh Jesus, man.
I mean, that's just the way or at least that's the image they portray. Like why they continue arguing about, the Apple iPhone passcode when even, the head of NSA says we would not support this. I mean, why do you keep beating that dog? I mean, that's just it's insane to me that they want to continue fighting that fight when they've basically been shot down everywhere. Why continue? I mean, you just keep what is the saying? The true definition of insanity is repeating the same experiment over and over again and expecting different results.
Right, exactly.
I don't know. But then again, the reason why you got into computer security in the first place was because of an FBI agent not understanding how TCP ports work. And so from a technology standpoint, this is why I say that they are that way. There might be some people over there that do have a clue. I just haven't met them.
I don't know how many FBI agents I know, so I don't know that I can comment.
Like I said, there's probably some that are probably brilliant. I just haven't met them. All the people that I've come in contact with have been less than stellar.
Wow. I don't know, man. The economy of scale, right? Maybe you just don't know the right fucking people.
Well, I guess I can't say that all of them. With. This is true. This is true.
Right? Oh God.
So I guess that's our thing on e-voting. I mean, we shouldn't be afraid of change, because the only way that we're going to improve it is to jump in.
Well, because we got a few minutes left, and I'll bring this up because there's a bigger infrastructure, and I mean that informally, thing that I think about sometimes, which could, I think, benefit society by changing massively. And I tweeted about this some time ago, where I was talking about replacing jurors and judges with AI to not only boost efficiency, but to eliminate bias. I mean, just anyway, man. So even if we didn't replace jurors, why do I have to go? Why? Because let's be honest, it's not being on a jury that's burdensome. It's the bullshit of having to get there, right, with all the other fools, because traffic sucks and parking sucks and you're not getting paid dick, right? So why can't I just do it virtually? Why can't you just have an e-jury? I mean,
we could, but there's this aspect that if, let's say you were doing a murder trial and the person may wind up getting sentencing for the death penalty, depending on the state that you're in.
Sure.
There's an aspect of looking that person in the eye that you're going to say you're going to die.
Yeah, sure. And we'll have video, man. I'm not saying like do it through text chat.
Yeah, I understand, but I think that's the in-person aspect. I mean, even right here, we know each other, but doing stuff over the phone, over video, people still would tend to do things they wouldn't normally do in person.
How long do you think before that changes? And that's kind of what I'm getting at. It's
society changes with that?
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm not that kind of doctor.
Why not?
I just haven't chosen to be an expert in that field yet.
I think it's coming, man. I think it's coming quicker than people think.
It would not surprise me if our great grandkids were in that generation,
sure,
removed, that it would have changed to what we're talking about right now. That wouldn't surprise me. Sooner than that, I think I would be a little bit shocked. It's possible we could see it in our lifetime. It's possible, but I would be shocked if it was before we retired. Let's say the age was 67 and a half for retirement right now. I'd be shocked if it happens before then. So, in the next 20 years, I would be shocked.
Man, what the fuck is the world going to be like in 20 years, dude? It'll be 2036.
Yeah.
That's some Jetsons type shit.
We were already supposed to have flying cars. The Jetsons lied.
Well, look, it's not for lack of people inventing them and them working.
Yeah, I know. It comes back to fear. It comes back to fear. Yes. We could have had electric engines in the 80s, but the oil industry has too much money and power, and they have lobbyings, and that they just line the pockets.
Libertarian anarchism, man.
Which is why I think Donald Trump's going to wind up winning this election.
Dude, it's likely.
I think he wins.
And I still haven't met anybody No, I mean, not that I go out and like fucking walk around the mall asking people, but I have yet to meet somebody or hear of somebody from somebody that will admit that they're going to vote for him. And
Hey,
yet,
I'm voting for Gary Johnson.
me too. Me
Because
too.
I mean, I can't say that I agree with everything Gary Johnson, does and says, and he seems to be a little bit off. But I mean, I just can't, in good conscience, vote for either Hillary or Donald. But I would like, this really all comes back. Perot screwed all of us because if he had just declared a party, we would have three parties right now. If he had just declared a party, because they would have been able to get federal financing, or federal funding rather.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm going to do it just so that way I can say, one, I didn't vote for either of them lunatics, and hopefully, maybe, I think we need 5% of the popular vote in order for them to qualify. I think
Something like that. Something like that.
So I'm going to vote that way.
It's a huge step because I think this is the first time that somebody from not from the two parties has been on the national ballot.
Yeah,
legitimately. So that's a huge step. Here's the thing, man. I can't. Whoever gets elected president's president, man. So I mean, leader's leader. You don't have to agree with it, but respect the fucking position, right? But dude, everybody I talk to is like, oh, that guy's a fucking fool. I'm not going to vote for him, whatever. And yet, I feel it, man. The zeitgeist is that he's going to win.
I think he is, and I think because it's constantly going. I mean, he wins no matter what, right? It doesn't matter if he becomes president. He said it himself. One way or another, I'm going to be on Pennsylvania Avenue because I just opened up a hotel, which was great, right? Yeah. So he wins no matter what monetarily.
Oh yeah, yeah, for sure.
He sets his family up. His son. Donald Jr. to start being a politician. I mean, he wants to be the Kennedys.
Yeah,
that's what he wants.
Yeah. Well, I mean, because if you already have the business dynasty like he does, what's left? Well, what do you use money to buy? Political power, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
I mean, you can't go by being a fucking rocket scientist. I mean, either you are or you aren't.
Right. Right. So I think, and this is a big reason why as well. One, unfortunately, I think the millennials are not going to go out and vote. They've proven that otherwise it would not be Hillary as the candidate. It would wind up being Bernie Sanders. And I would have probably voted for Bernie Sanders, not because I agree with everything, but I at least believe that whatever he says is true. Like he believes it's true. And I can respect that. But the millennials didn't show up to vote for him. So what makes me believe they're going to show up to vote for Hillary? And that's the reason why I think Donald Trump wins. Because the other people, never underestimate the people who watch reality television.
Yeah. Well, I mean, having Hillary Clinton as president's a disgusting proposition, man.
I just, I can't vote for her because I mean, here's the thing: she's a trained lawyer. I mean, it's not like she went to some bad law school. Yale's, pretty decent law school.
That's legitimate.
Yeah. She went and worked for a pretty prestigious law firm. First Lady of Arkansas, First Lady of the United States, Senator, Secretary of State. And yet you didn't know the difference between what's classified and unclassified and whether or not you should put a mail server and do government business through there. I mean, every company in the world says, at least from all the ones that I've looked at, so we won't say all. Every company that I have ever reviewed has a policy that says, do not do work on personal, systems like Gmail, Yahoo, your own personal mail servers. Keep it within the enterprise.
Man,
So,
I'll end with this, dude. It's just like that fucking Dave Chappelle skit when he talks about him driving with his white friend Chip, and Chip's drunk and speeding, and the cop pulls him over, and he's like, "I didn't know I couldn't do that," and the cop's like, "Well, you just don't do it again."
Yeah.
Right? I mean, I didn't know I couldn't do that.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Exactly.
Oh, man. It reminds me of that time I was in Seattle, man. Like I'm not sure I was on this plane of existence. And we were walking around downtown, and man, it just felt like a comic book. Like I looked around, I'm like, dude, this isn't real. And it's some kind of caricature of the Matrix. So it's not even like a cool Unreal. It's just shit like this. You're like, well, I mean, Dave Chappelle said it like 10 years ago.
Yeah.
I'm white.
I didn't know.
I couldn't do that.
Right. Exactly.
Oh man.
All right, so there's episode 29.
Yeah, people be comfortable with change. Don't be Luddites.
Embrace it.
We have a lot of progress to make as a species. Let's get on board with that. All right. That's what I got, guys. Episode 29. I think we're done.
Same time. Same. See y'all next week.
Something like
Maybe.
that.
Maybe.
Yeah, we'll see what happens, dude. It's getting cold here. Later.
You have no idea.